Hi, I'm Rachel with Ally Safety, and one of the questions that I get asked all the time on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn Messenger is how do I start working internationally as a safety pro? To be honest, my experience working internationally is limited and mostly was from clients I had already had through consulting. So I'm actually not the best person to give advice in this area. That's why I reached out to Kathy Seabrook, a health and safety professional and the founder of Global Solutions Incorporated. Kathy has worked all around the world, and in this interview provides us with insights and experience to help you get started on the path to taking your career international. So without further ado, let's jump right into it.
Well, Rachel, thank you. I think this all kind of started out of a LinkedIn post for you, talking about what it's like to work globally. I've been an expat almost 10 years of my life in the UK. Yeah, so I mean, I can really actually speak to this. Just some background on me. I'm known as the Global Gal. I've been involved in managing safety and health globally, first within a company in the financial services industry. And then I started my company, Global Solutions, Inc., back in 1996. And that was when the first time I repatriated from the UK and came back, and I had all this knowledge about managing safety and health in Europe. And really, the company I was with was really needing someone to really manage in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York. And I smiled and said, that's not me. So that's when I started Global Solutions Inc. My daughter was 22 months at the time. And so it was a challenge, but I have to say it has been incredibly rewarding. My work is really working with business leaders. So it can be CEOs, boards of directors, C-suite, typically with the heads of safety, health, and environmental, to really embed and integrate safety and health and environmental, because to me, EHS kind of all goes together within companies, into their business. So what I try to do is help companies understand the risk and the rewards, so the opportunities associated with embedding safety and health.
The thing that kind of brought me to making that LinkedIn post is people ask me all the time, how do I start working internationally as a safety pro? And I've traveled internationally a lot. I lived out of a backpack for over a year, doing the whole digital nomad thing and starting my business online. But I don't really work internationally that much. What advice would you give them if they want to work internationally? What sort of positions are in demand?
For me, safety is safety throughout the world. And if you are thinking about actually living, because there's a difference between living internationally and actually managing internationally. So one is where you're an actual expat. You are actually in country and you are working within an organization, or as a consultant, or as a contract employee, because this happens specifically in the Middle East a lot. Expat meaning on-site, outside of your home country, external to your own home country, your your country of national origin. And then there is, you can be the global lead within your company that's based in Texas or New Jersey, and you would travel internationally. So you might be involved in implementing risk assessment processes or incident investigation, your corporate standards around management of change, hazard identification, risk assessment, all those kinds of things. So the cases, if you're in your company and you're a global lead, you would be involved in traveling. So you might be somewhere for a week or 2 weeks, where you're transferring knowledge on site. You might be doing audits, right, or assessments. You might be doing training, things of that nature, but you would then come back to your home country. So that's one way. The key is you have to be in a global company to do that. So that
Right.
also one needs to be thinking about, right? If you're in a domestic U.S. company, you need to be thinking about what's your progression in terms of working in a global company. So that's the first thing there. So there's a couple things to consider. You need to have a subject matter expertise, whatever that is.
That's a
part of that
great
is
point.
So part of it is, it could be technical expertise, it could be communications, it could be, some of the soft skills, it could be culture and transferring the knowledge around the culture of your company. It can be around systems and processes like risk assessment, incident investigation, management of change. And it could be about implementing a management system and really transferring that knowledge and helping that in-country site gain certification to ISO 45001, for example. And the reason is, like every country, including the United States, it's about jobs. And they want jobs for their own people. So a company, if they're going to expatriate you, they have to go through a whole process to get a work permit. And that work permit, basically, they go through the process to demonstrate that the company cannot get the expertise to do that particular job in country. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of money. I just think it's important to understand this. It's not a barrier to entry, but it certainly does impact decision making.
So the second point I'm hearing from you is to have a niche or an area of expertise. Now, some of my best friend colleagues in safety are international. So one is an Iranian, one is a Chinese citizen who went to college over here in the United States and decided to stay after they graduated. And so they've all gone through this process of whatever company hires them, that company has to justify their position in the company and why they can't find that expertise somewhere else. So they've had to position themselves into this niche of knowledge that is unique. And so what I'm hearing from you is the second big point is you have to have a subject matter expertise that is somewhat unique, right?
See, what you described is just kind of turning everything on its head and someone expatriating to the United States. It's the same.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great example. And I think it's important for people to understand that it's not about any country discriminating against an individual. It's about jobs for the people.
But if I were to say I want to go work internationally, like I've got a CSP and a CIH, those are US certifications. What certifications do you need, or what sort of expertises are in demand more internationally in your experience?
So I think that's a good question. And so for me, I have certifications in Europe and as well as the UK. I'm actually a fellow of the British Institution of Occupational Health and Safety. And I would say that if you are working for a US-based multinational company and you have a CIH, a CSP, that's good enough.
Okay.
If you are looking to work for a company in the Middle East, if you have a CSP, it's recognized in most countries.
That's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, in the Middle East countries. But if you're looking to work in the UK for a UK company and you're not looking to be an expat for them in the United States, right, for reverse flow, there's certifications that are outside that, it's called a CMOSH. It's the chartered member of the Institution of Occupational Health and Safety. And that tends to be recognized, that or the American tend to be recognized in the Middle East, and obviously in places in Europe. And if you are certified for a CMOSH, then you can to work to have a certification in Europe. Right now, that's not changing, but with Brexit, who knows what will happen longer term. But right now,
oh yeah,
still do that. But one should understand that, like China, for example, if you're going to work in China, there are certifications in China that people have to have in order to practice and be a safety professional. If you are going over and transferring knowledge, because I've done work in China, in transferring knowledge, not necessarily, well, it could be as an expat, but short term, then you don't necessarily need to have that. Now the legislation there may be changing. Again, they want a level playing field for everyone. And Australia has their own certification, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, most of the developing countries, as well as Singapore. So it's if you're going to be an expat, you've got to go from your home country and move over, unless you are a contract employee. And then a company, for example, in the Middle East, may have you come and do work because they need expertise in management system certification. So you would come over, and if you had, from a U.S. perspective, if you had certifications, and for example, if you had certificates that demonstrate your knowledge, say from ASSP, for example, your knowledge as a certified auditor or something that's ANAB accredited training in the United States to be a certified auditor for ISO 45001, for example. All of those kinds of things in your CV or your resume all will demonstrate your competence, because at the end of the day, that's what they're looking for, is competence.
I think one thing that a lot of people forget about is the cultural differences that come with working with an international company. So I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of cultural differences with how many different places you've worked. Do you have any advice or things that people should look out for or just be aware of to what's different when you go to a different culture and try to do the same job you've been doing in the US?
Yes. Traveling and working for global companies, the biggest thing that will trip you up is the culture, the country culture. Now, if you're working in a U.S. company and you have operations in different parts of the world, Asia, Latin America, the people there have already come over halfway, because one, they're going to be speaking in English. Obviously, amongst themselves, they'll speak in their local language. But part of, at least on the leadership team, is the determination that they want to understand and be able to speak English, and that'll be part of why they're with the company. But also start to understand the business culture of an American company, and so that really helps a lot, because part of the reason why you would go over is to transfer the business, the culture of your company. So
you're like a cultural ambassador.
Exactly. But
Whoa,
here's the thing. This is what trips you up. So as I shared, I've been an expat in the UK for almost 10 years of my life. And the things that trip me up the most were the things they just kind of hit me sideways. It would be words, or they would be how something contextually is used. So you know how people, like if you're in a meeting and someone says, all right, let's table that conversation. That basically means you're taking it off the table. You're not going to address it during the meeting.
Yeah.
So these are the silly things, right? And this is where two countries actually are divided by common language, UK and US. So we're in this meeting, and one of my fellow managers said, well, let's table that issue. So I'm thinking that, okay, we're going to bypass that. We're going to go on. And then he all of a sudden starts talking about the issue. I'm like, what's going on? So finally in the meeting, and thank goodness, because the key to working globally is developing relationships. So I will absolutely tell you, you have to do this and come clean. If you've made a major faux pas, like you've said something that is really not appropriate, but you don't know, come clean. It's like, hey, mea culpa.
Okay.
But relationships are the key to working international. And so this cultural differences. So basically, because I have relationships with my fellow managers, I looked at them and I said, I just have to say, when in my world, when we table something, that means that we're going to discuss it at the next meeting. And everyone started laughing. They said, oh, no. Here in the UK, to table it means we're putting it on the table. And we're talking about it. I said, that makes sense now. I'm happy to discuss, but I just couldn't figure it out. And so it endears people, right? Endears them. And it really helps to build relationships. And the key is you need those relationships. Because for me, the greatest thing that I can also share tips is develop your own network. So internal to your company, go talk to people who have been expats in places you're going. Find out, the things that they've learned, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of books out there on cross-cultural education. I personally have taught in the past many cross-cultural seminars for ASSP, and part of it is, and I like when you talked about looking at yourself first. So I always start out with figuring out who you are and what are the things that make you who you are. So in some countries, you don't talk about families. Other countries, you don't not talk about your family because people want to know you as a person. And so part of it is to figure out where that is. Latin America is big like that. Southern France, for example, is big like that. They want to know about you. They want to know, Spain and Italy, they want to know more about you. But then there's other countries that it's about the business, and it's about who you work for. And for example, being a woman, people have said to me, is that an issue when you're in Asia or when you're in the Middle East? And what I always say is there are certain nuances. So for example, I would not put my hand out first to shake a Muslim's hand. I always let them do that first, right?
Okay.
That's what you do. And there's some that will not. And then there's others that will. They're more westernized, or they've traveled in the US.
I just recently came back from a trip from Dubai. And just the interactions that I had as a tourist there were mind-boggling to me. I'm currently 6 months pregnant, so obviously showing. And they would let me ahead in line in immigration. And I'm just like, this is like winning the jackpot. Like, you just don't get that otherwise. And so those little differences, I think, would probably be huge to learn as much about as you possibly could before going to work in a country.
Absolutely.
One thing that I think we sometimes forget is when we go to another country, we're there to learn about their culture. And I think that's really what sparks most people to want to work internationally. But then at the same time, how do we go being respectful that other people have different values, different backgrounds, and different perspectives, but are still valuing our expertise? And how do we marry those together in a respectful, efficient, and effective way?
I just want to jump in there on that, because for me, it's all about results, right? You are being asked to go into a country to do a job. And so it's very mindful that we know how to get that job done, keeping culture in mind. So that's important. But the focus is on getting the job done. And for me, I always say to people, this is the best tip. It's listen and watch before you engage your voice. Because there are many ways to do a risk assessment. There are many ways to identify a hazard in terms of risk assessment. There are many ways to go through and investigate an incident. And there are ways not to do it. And the culture is usually how not to do it. But if you listen and you ask good questions and you don't tell people what to do initially, but you can bring them back to the corporate standards and ask them, so what is that corporate standard on incident investigation? Can you show me how it's done here? Can you walk me through a risk assessment? Can we do a risk assessment together? Because, in some countries, they are really highly technology driven. And so they may not use as many workers. And then there are other countries where labor is very, very reasonable. So they may use more people, and they may not use technology. There's a balance that needs to play out between the cultural difference and actually getting the job done, because that's very important. Otherwise, guess what? You're not going to be in your job very long.
Fair enough, right?
Yes.
Well, that's awesome advice. And I think probably a good place to leave this, because it gives people a good starting point, but not so much that you get overwhelmed.
Just give a little recap. Talk to your boss. First thing, talk to your boss. If you're really interested, talk to your boss about it, because we shouldn't anticipate anything. There may be opportunities and they just don't know that you want to go there. So
right.
First thing, talk to your boss, your immediate boss, if you're in a company that actually has operations outside of the US. So that's the first thing. Think about what your skill sets are. So do your own personal assessment. Like you talked about being an IH, and you talked about the expertise, your petroleum engineering expertise. You might not be in that industry, but that might be a transferable skill. So be thinking about the kinds of things that you would bring. And because this is going to be the case you're going to make to your boss as to why it's you versus your colleague, that should be expatriated. So to me, those are the two things. And build out your network, right? So they now know you, the people that are going to listen to this, they now know me. They can reach out to us. I would put a plug in for the American Society of Safety Professionals. There's the Global Operations Practice Specialty. I was one of the group when I first came back to the US that started. It was originally the international practice specialty. And we looked around, it was like all my colleagues that were global. And we said, there's no network, let's build it. So we did. And I became their first chair. And it was a blast. And because we all learned from each other, and we weren't all from the US, we also had people that were in global companies outside, so we could all learn from each other. So that network is really important, and that's kind of a built-in network if anyone's interested. So with that, I'm back to you. Rachel's been delightful today, and I love talking about global, as you can tell.
Yeah, me too. I could geek out on this for a while. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Again, I learned a lot from this, and I could talk for hours and just pick your brain about things, but I think we've got a good start for people. So make sure to check out Kathy. Kathy, where can people get in touch with you or find out more about you and your career outside of this video?
So Rachel, I will send you my bio so you can post that or do whatever you do in terms of LinkedIn, but also just find me on LinkedIn and reach out to me. And you can follow, but also do an invite. I'm always happy to connect with people and message back and forth. So awesome. Kathy Seabrook, and CEO of Global Solutions, Inc., and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until the next time, I'll see you guys later.